All right, my man. Are we ready to get this party started?
I think we are.
Podcast number 24.
Ladies, gentlemen, welcome back to your Bedroom Super Producer podcast. We are your hosts. My name is JT.
And I'm BK.
And today, we are going to switch things up. We want to give you the best of our knowledge and experience. And in doing so, today we are going to discuss our desert island plugins. So what would we absolutely take on with us if we were to survive a nuclear disaster or something, that would change our lives forever? We would absolutely need those plugins still to make some crazy beats. And without being too overly dramatic, BK, why don't you start this party for us?
All right. So those are the top 3 plugins that we would take on a deserted island. Of course, we expect that this island would have some facilities already, that there would be computers at our disposals with a normal OS at our disposals, preferably some Macs, because you ain't going too far with no plugins, with no computers.
Maybe a few samples on some hard drives as well.
Yeah, maybe a couple hard drives. But anyway, top 3 plugins on my side. Since you know that I'm of the sound design game, I'm always looking for that special something, that special all-in-one that I can pretty much do everything. And if I need to design some drum sounds or some synth sounds or whatever. So for me, it'd be, and you're going to be impressed. For me, my top desert island plugin would be number 1, Serum.
Why am I not surprised?
I think you should be surprised. Anyway, so yeah, Serum, X for Serum, by our friend Steve Duda. So yeah, I think I have to give all the credit to you for introducing me to this wonderful plugin. Because before that, I was using mainly Kontakt stuff and mainly Massive, Komplete stuff. But once I got my hands on that Serum interface, I think that the sound design just went to another level. I think that it encompasses, it reunites everything that we love about sound designing tools, be it sound, be it noises, be it everything. Everything is in there, and it's very clear. The layout, it's clear. The oscillators are clear. The filters that are right. Everything is in the same interface. Nothing is really hidden. You have basically 4 sections: the oscillator section, the effects section, the matrix, and the global parameters. But you can pretty much do everything in the oscillator section. Your envelopes are there. The LFOs are there. There's no limit to the voices and everything. You've got plenty of choices of filter. You have a sub. You have a noise section. The envelopes, everything is very clean. And also, it's a wavetable synth. So it comes with plenty of wavetable that you can morph between. There's plenty of ways to mix different waveforms together. The unison is fantastic on that synth. You can pretty much put like 16 voices per oscillator. There's 2 oscillator. So you can have up to 32 voices going at the same time. So pretty awesome. And for me, aside from that, because right there, wavetable synth is something that you can find in other synth. The oscillator, everything, it's pretty much like basic stuff, except that it's the coding behind it is very well done. And for me, the top thing about this synth is mainly the fact that you can create your own wavetables. And for me, that was the game changer. You can pretty much put any sound you want in there. You can put short, really short sounds in there. You can even put pictures in there. It's gonna transform it into wavetables. There's plenty of editing that can be done. You can fold the wavetables. So just that special utility that's in there, the wavetable editor, for me, that's what sold it to me. And also the fact that on each oscillator, there's effect that you can put. You can use frequency modulation on it. You can use amplitude modulation on it. All kinds of things. And what's fun is that once you have a setting that you want, you can freeze that setting and transform it into a wavetable. So really, Serum for me is my top synth / sound design tool, because you can pretty much customize each wavetable exactly how you want, and it gives you like such a flexibility, and that's why it's my number one desert island synth.
I think it's a great choice. I mean, I remember when we switched, we were pretty much on Omnisphere at the time, and then I was like, it's taking too long. I can't really, follow tutorials and figure out this sound design game. And then out of nowhere, I started to see these tutorials on YouTube pop up about Serum, and the way the GUI also is laid out kind of makes it easier than, say, Massive. And I think that's why a lot of EDM producers actually switched from Massive to Serum, because the way you apply modulators is kind of the same. But for some reason, and maybe you can comment on that, but it's just faster and a bit easier to apply all these modulation routes inside of Serum versus Massive.
They're both like a drag and drop type. So you take the type of LFO you want to apply and you drag it to the parameter and everything. But it's like you said, the layout is much more fun, much more clear in Serum. You see where it's going. You see which parameter gets affected. You click on the LFO and you see all the knobs that are assigned to that LFO. They just light up. You know where you're going. There's nothing going on in the background without you knowing it. You just click on the LFO and you see everything in front of you. You click on the envelope and you see the parameters that they apply to. So it's very intuitive. And I think Steve Duda did a great job with the coding and with just the interface. It's right there. And I think it's difficult sometimes these days to have everything you want to be able to move and change every parameter, the thousands of parameters. So it's difficult today to unite all that flexibility under one window or two windows, and also to grab just the essential ones that are really make the most bang for your buck in terms of sound design. And I think he did a great job on Serum.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the lesson from that is, if you want to get into sound design, you first have to choose and pick a tool that you like, that you are inspired by in terms of the look and the flow of the different windows you can access to change the sounds you're creating. And I think that's really way more than actually how many oscillators or what kind of coding they're using, and if it's, treating those artificial circuit boards a certain way. Like, what I'm trying to say is, at the end of the day, they all sound pretty much great if you know what you're doing.
Exactly. And you have to be, for me today, with the technology we have, the computers we have, anything can sound great if you're an expert at it, if you know what you're doing, if you've put time into learning it. So that's why it's important to grab something that's intuitive for the way you make music, the way you make sounds.
All right. So do you want me to chime in with my first plugin, or you want to keep going with your own list?
No. let's do like one at a time.
All right. So I'm going to take our listeners more into the mixing realm. And for the longest time, I was reading in, Music Tech and Sound on Sound and all of these magazines that it was very important to kind of test your mixes in mono. And they were talking about a lot of phasing issues and all of that. And coming from an 100% in the box situation, I never really saw the importance of mono. And then once the big EDM craze came on the scene, I guess it was like 2013, 2014, something like that. I was reading that all of these famous DJs were especially treating the kick and the bass in mono. And so what I'm getting at is that there are many different plugins that'll do that, but putting a plugin on your master chain that will put everything in mono below a certain frequency has become kind of a game changer for me. The one that I'm using is by Good Hertz, and I think the name of the plugin is Midside, Midside, and I'm just using the main preset that comes with the plugin, which is like mono below 150 hertz. And quite frankly, it might just be imaginary. Maybe you can correct me on that. But I feel like automatically my mixes became much easier to finish once I treated all my bass lines and kicks in mono. And so that's my first plugin, Good Hertz, Midside. Really, really cool little plugin, a really cool little company. We are actually sponsored by these guys, and I cannot recommend their products enough. I think that they do a great job. And so, is it a technique that you use, BK, on your side?
Not all the time, but if I'm finalizing a mix or something, I'm probably gonna make sure that all the low end content is really mono, because sometimes when you use samples or even when you record stuff, it's easy to have some sort of phasing issue that you're not aware of when you're composing. It's easy to have samples that are stereo and they shouldn't be stereo. So I think using a mono utility is one of the basic tricks that all engineers back in the days when they were mixing in the studios and maybe out of the box on the big console, they would use that, and they would especially use that to check their mixes and to check the balance of their mix, because people think that it's only to get a strong bass sound or to get a strong rhythm section, but actually testing your mixes, the overall mixes in mono, it gives you also it may sound counterintuitive, but it gives you a sense of if your panning was effective or not. Are you losing the cohesion of the main parts of the mix by panning too large, by panning too little, so testing panning of some instruments in mono may sound weird, but it gives you information if you did it correctly.
That actually motivates me to also do the whole mix in mono to make sure that my balance is right.
Exactly.
Because obviously, I'll do my mixes on either my monitors or my headphones, and when I take them in the car, I'm often still surprised at the balance, because the car obviously does something very different in terms of balance. So I think that that gives me the push that I need to go all the way with this mono thing.
Yeah, mono is very important, and if you reread the Mixing Engineer's Handbook, they talk a lot about mono, and like those, if you remember, usually in big studios they had like all kinds of speakers for the left, right, and sometimes on the console you had this little Auratone, this little white small speaker in the middle.
Yep.
That was to check the integrity of the mix in mono.
Yep.
So good call. Very, very good utility.
All right. So why don't you give us your number 2?
My number 2 is something that I discovered recently. I'm not sure you know about it. It's called the Drum Bus. And it's
Okay.
a plugin by Ableton. It's a new plugin that's available in Live 10.
Yeah.
And honestly, at first I saw reviews on the web, on YouTube and everything, and I wasn't really convinced. And I don't know if you remember, but we used kind of the same type of plugins for like drum. Like I think we used to have Waves, the Maserati collection that sound pretty good. And for me, the drum box for like a plugin that comes with the system, with the DAW, I think it's like one of the most awesome plugin for drums that I've seen in a while. And it's a pretty simple plugin. It's just about, it treats, there's 3 sections. There's the input section that treats the signal with, it gives it a little bit of saturation. Then there's a middle part that treats the mid to high range of the sound, and then you have bass control. And with these 3 little things, it's really interesting the types of sound that you can get. You can get all the way from an LA New York compression trick type of sound, like really squashed out sound, all the way to just slight saturation to give like your transient just that little boost that you would usually get if you would use it through let's say a vintage EQ or a vintage compression or something. So I absolutely love this plugin. Like I said, for me, distortion on drums always sounds a little bit, it sounds magic. It gives it something, it gives the transient something really, really interesting. And also treating these things separately, it gives really an interesting sound. You can, the way it treats the mid-range, you can get, if you want the sound to smack a little bit more, you can adjust the transient on it. You can also adjust a little bit of the damping if you're getting a little bit too much pop on the snare or something. And it's very interesting. You have to listen to it. So I would recommend go on YouTube and listen to like someone who tries it out. But there's something very interesting about that plugin, and also the way it treats the bass part. If you want a little bit more boom, you can adjust that little. You can adjust the resonance around that fundamental frequency for that tight low end. It's perfect if you want to make great 808s. It works. You can just find that perfect frequency and adjust the boom just to have that perfect punch at that specific note. You can also control the decay, and you can also adjust the note of your low end. So that's something, if we go back to a podcast we did a while back, where I think one of the tips that you gave was that you were tuning your drums, and you were tuning the bass drum and sometimes even the hi-hats, just to have that perfect feel with the key of the melody of your drums. Well, you can do that with that plugin. So that would be my number 2 choice. Of course, it's not something that you can buy separately. You have to get Live 10, the latest revision of Ableton, to have that plugin. But I think as a plugin that comes with a system, I think it's really, really interesting to be able to control that low end enhancement and all the damping control that comes with it. the transient emphasis or de-emphasis that you can control, that crunch, that drive that you can apply to the sound. You apply it, you don't even have to do anything, and it changes the drum sounds right away. And I would give this advice: don't just use it on drums. Try anything that's rhythmic. I think can benefit from the Drum Bus Ableton plugin.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of fun. Would you say that it tries to emulate old school analog gear through this saturation algorithm that they have?
Maybe a little bit, because there's different the saturation. There's three different kinds. If you go with like soft, you get a more like a wave shaping distortion. On the medium side, it's more like limiting distortion, and the hard is like clipping distortion with like a bass boost. And I think you're right. Like most vintage gear would use distortion, because distortion in analog is very different from distortion in the digital domain. In digital, you don't want to go over it because you're just clipping your signal. And analog, you're kind of adding some sort of warmness. You still have headroom, even if you clip just a little bit. You're just, in the analog domain, you're just driving your circuit a little bit more. And sometimes that over driving those circuit a little bit more is that special richness that you're sometimes looking for. So yeah, in a way, they're kind of emulating old vintage gear without necessarily calling out the type of emulation or the gear that they're emulating.
So we've got like a saturator, multi-band compressor, transient shaper, all bundled into one.
Exactly. Well, compression, I'm not too sure. I think since it's a drum bus, it's probably compressing in bands, but you don't have any control on that. It's mainly drive, emphasis on like the mid to high, and the control for the bass part. But in a way, if you're controlling these three things, you're kind of compressing in a way if you control these parameters, because you're EQing it, so the response is not the same. So so it's kind of a mix of everything. It's kind of one of those magic boxes, a little bit like I was talking at the beginning, like the Maserati plugin. You know, you twist the knob, you don't know quite what it's doing, but it sounds good.
Well, that's the only important thing, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I love you and hate you for that, because I'm obviously going to go back on the Ableton site to make my mind up if I finally switch to version 10 of Ableton.
Yeah.
But that would be a great addition to my arsenal for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on to my number 2. If you know what I do, if you watch any of our tutorials on YouTube, you would know by now that 99% of my mixing process, and even a bit of, you know, my creative process in terms of tone shaping, goes through using an EQ. And for the past, I'd say, I don't know, when did we discover the whole FabFilter line? Like 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe? It wasn't all that long ago.
Probably 3-4 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
So I think they're pretty much top, in my book, top EQ reference. Even the analyzer is awesome. So
yeah. I mean, everybody's got a Pro Q2, and now I just switched, I think a few months ago, to Pro Q3, which is my number 2 Deserted Island plugin. And the reason why is that I love, like I said, shaping the tone of pretty much everything that I put in my tracks, whether it be drum tracks, basses, guitars, vocals. I need something from which I can dial up real quick, you know, low pass filters, high pass filters, high and low shelves. and then having a lot of control over the bell EQs that I apply to my sounds. And maybe I'm a bit OCD in that sense, but I really go in deep with my sounds. The EQ curves on certain sounds are just ridiculous sometimes. And if you want to go ridiculous, there's nothing better than the Pro Q3. Now, Pro Q2 does pretty much everything the Pro Q3 does, but what I really wanted to try out when I finally upgraded was, I'm not sure the term exactly, but it's kind of I guess they call it dynamic EQing, where you set up a bell, but it'll only attenuate certain frequencies if the frequencies are actually playing in the sound, So that way you can actually just tame, for example, some high mid harshness without necessarily changing the overall tone of, say, a lead guitar, for example. So if certain notes just peak out, you can control only just those notes when they're played, without changing completely the character. And again, for me, it's all about character. Mixing, for me, in the box is all about getting that perfect, aggressive, yet not ear-tiring sound out of anything and everything, whether it be hi-hats, shakers. If you want to lift the top off of some basses to make them more present in the mix, especially in this earbud and AirPod era, you're going to need a great tool to, boost up those high frequencies without creating some digital harshness. So Pro Q3 for me is a must have. Actually, it's probably my number one.
All right. But just one question for you. What's the difference between Pro Q2 and 3?
Well, like I said, for me, I haven't, I'm not a big techie producer where I'll read up on all of the tech specs. Usually there are two things I'm looking for in a plugin. If I like the interface visually, and if the workflow is conducive to more speed and efficiency when I'm working. So that was the big one for me when I went from historically from the Logic band EQ to actually getting a specialized EQ plugin for all of my mixing duties. And so I felt like the control over the bells, the way you could really shape up, the cue and the shape and the depth and all of that seemed great. And then, like I said, once they had the dynamic EQing thing going on, I knew I had to switch because I was already, evaluating some other plugins. I think there's a plugin called Soothe, Soothe, which was basically doing some of the same thing, but with some kind of AI there, where it'll draw up some crazy deep bells in the 1 to 4 kilohertz range to tame some of that digital harshness. Because I was really trying to push my masters as loud and as clean as possible without them being harsh. And I was already doing some of that with the Pro Q2 that I wanted to maybe achieve with that Soothe plugin, but I felt like it was just a bit too expensive for just this very specialized, very focused area of my mixing process. And so I then just went back to my mixing and tried to figure out how I can smooth out all of these harsh frequencies. And once I had this dynamic thing going on, because with the Pro Q2, I was doing a lot of that, but I was losing sometimes some of the character in the sounds that I liked because I just had to tame the harshness to push my master. Okay. When I say push my master, I mean really pushing the limiter to its lowest or highest value, if you will, without the master becoming too squashed and just destroying my work. So I mean the dynamic EQing for me is what sold me to the Pro Q3.
All right, good shit. All right, for my final plugin is something that's very basic that I'm sure most people use. I'm sure you use it too. And so you're going to love me. You have that plugin. You don't have to buy another version of Ableton to get it. So my final plugin, I'm going to call the Auto Filter. The Auto Filter is one of those plugins that I think it's very underrated. I think people don't really see the full potential of that plugin because usually the way that most people use it, it's either to cut the high end or cut the low end. That's usually how they would use it. But if you use it that way, it's fine. You can use it that way, but you're kind of missing the point of the auto in the Auto Filter. And
right.
And I really discovered this a long time ago, but still use it today. There's a lot of good, like additional things that you can do with the Auto Filter beside cutting things or filtering things or even like automating things. So for those of you guys who don't know the Auto Filter, basically the Auto Filter is a filter, right? And you have all these different parameters. It can either be a low pass, high pass, band pass, or you can even have this morph feature, which it transforms into a high pass beyond a certain value of the frequency for the filter, and you can alternate from high pass to low pass if you put it in this morph setup. But beside that, there's many things that people don't even use. Usually when you get into the Auto Filter, you use it as is. You don't change that much. You may be going to play with the frequency and the resonance. But there's a lot of like circuit options that I found very interesting. And you can mimic old synth filters with it, and people don't even know it. Just to give you an example, where there's a little box where you can switch the filter types, and you have plenty of filter types. If you switch it to MS2, well, you're going to be able to mimic those old Salin key filters, mainly like the the MS20, the Korg. So if you like that filter, you can use that setup. If you switch it to PRD, then you're going to be using like a kind of a ladder filter Mugi type of filter. So just switching the types of filter and you get these kind of different sounds. And if you switch to those vintage setup, you even get the oscillating part in the resonance. If you push the resonance to the max, the filter is going to start to oscillate like an oscillator. So you get that resonance aspect. You get also the drive aspect of the filter. So that's a lot of fun. Also, another thing that we rarely use when we use this type of filter is that there's an envelope. And the envelope, usually we use it a lot if you're playing on a Moog or a Voyager or whatever, a Slim Fatty, Little Fatty. You're going to be playing with the envelope of the filter, that how you want the filter to interact with the amplifier envelope or the way you play. And the Auto Filter has that too. So you can tweak the envelope just so it reacts to when it receives a specific type of information. And you can even clock that envelope to be on the BPM of the track with the quantize function in it. And that's, I think, something that people don't use. So the fact that you can use the envelope to shape the filter or the way the filter acts, I think it's something that's it can give a lot of motion to the type of tracks that you're running through it, be it a bass, be it a synth, or even drums. And also, there's also the LFO part. So you can have even a rhythmic aspect to the way your filter is triggered. And if you mix all these together, well, it's pretty powerful. You can pretty much do pretty much everything with that. And final but not least, you can also sidechain the filter. So you could sidechain the filter to, let's say, a drum or a bass to trigger the filter, the envelope, and the LFO controlling the filter, controlled by another track. So for me, those things is, I think it's a pretty deep plugin that you can do a lot of things. The sidechaining part, you can have really like an effect, kind of like a compressor, but more on the frequency. And if you combine that with automation, I think the sky's the limit. So that would be my final plugin.
Wow. I mean, I will plead guilty on all those charges of not trying to change the filter mode or using the envelope or, side chaining it, which are all incredible techniques that you can use to, like you said, give some groove and some movement to a rather static track.
Exactly.
And I will just add, because I'm also a very big fan of the auto filter, is the fact that it's so CPU efficient. Yeah, like you can slap one on every track. If you have a 50 track session, it won't make your computer, cough just one bit. Like it's there. It sounds great. It's very usable. Again, we both made points of using plugins that have an interface that is straightforward and easy to use. And so I think that this one also falls into that category.
And it's got a very vintagey feel to it, even just right out of the box.
It's very gratifying, like with the first mode. So that I think that's why I never really delved into it deeper. It's just the fact that you just roll off some frequencies on the top end and it sounds great. You know?
Exactly.
All right. Great choice, man. Great choice. I mean, again, it goes to show that you don't have to go into some really obscure German company to find incredible plugins. You can just use whatever's on your DAW and you'll find gems there.
Yeah, stock plugins. I think people don't give credit, don't give enough credit to stock plugins in different DAWs. I think what we get today, I think like engineers and musicians would have been so jealous of us 20, 30 years ago. It'd have been, they wouldn't understand why we buy extra plugins with all we get in our DAWs today.
Yeah, especially at the price tag too, because an EQ back in the day was probably $5,000.
Exactly, and now you can have more than you can chew for $5,000.
Exactly. All right, so allow me to bring to the table my number 3, and it'll be actually a category because I've changed my my setup in the past months, but my last one was actually a free plugin by Xfer called the OTT, and it's a very used and overused plugin, but it really has some magic in there. And for me, it was always pretty much the same context. Whether my mix lacked a bit of top-end excitement, or whether I wanted one instrument to really shine and cut through everything else, I would use the OTT with some pretty drastic values, like 50% and up. Whether it be like, a vocal chop that I really wanted to stand on top of everything else in my track, or if I just wanted to have like a very aggressive in-your-face mix overall, I would slap an OTT on my master out. And I've talked about, digital harshness and the way that if you mix a track all in a box, usually around 1, 2, or 4K, you will have some issues. And the frequencies in there are very ear-tiring. And sometimes we don't necessarily hear it. But if you want your track to stand the test of time and be something that you can go back and listen to time and time again, you will absolutely need to tame those frequencies. And so all of that said, to say that the OTT kind of brings out those harsh frequencies. So for a long time, I wanted to change the OTT in my master out chain, especially. But it was so gratifying the way it brought out, the high end and made it very much in your face, because the OTT is kind of a multi-band exciter compressor. And it really does a bunch of different things that are quite difficult to pinpoint. I guess you have...
It expands also the sound.
Yeah.
It expands
exactly.
sometimes those sounds that are not that loud, and it expands them. And I found it that if you set it up incorrectly, you get so much noise. You really have to set it up in a particular, like the thresholds that you put in. Sometimes what I even do with the OTT, well, I don't really use the OTT. I use the real OTT. I use the multiband in Ableton. And I usually remove specific frequencies. Let's say I'm going to use like the OTT just on the mids, or just on the highs, or just on the bass, so that you don't have too much of that interaction. But if you use it as a final plugin, like on a master out, I understand that you have to keep all those things. But I found that it's a very complicated plugin to make sound right, don't you think?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, when you first start to use the OTT, you'll go crazy, and you'll find that it makes everything sound great. But then, like you said, when you get some perspective on your tracks, you realize that it makes a lot of stuff harsh, and then it can also muddy up like the low mids. So you have to be careful. So then I started to dial down like just the mix knob on the OTT, but it was still not quite what I was after. And lately, again, just a couple months ago, I switched to and I guess I'm talking about these plugins, those kinds of exciter, multiband compressor type plugins. For our users out there who shouldn't be afraid of all-in-one plugins, some purists might say, well, you don't even know what it's doing, and then they want to have control over everything. But if it sounds good to me and it goes fast, I'll use it. And so for the longest time, I was trying to switch the OTT to something that would kind of give me the same sonic characteristics, something that makes your whole mix in your face, something that really easily and quick and dirty trick to just bring out a lead guitar or a vocal chop or something like that. And so I stumbled upon this Waves plugin called Mixcentric. And it's basically just a one knob thing where apparently it'll EQ and compress different bands, kind of applying the typical smiley face EQ. And the more you apply it, the more obviously the mix becomes kind of harsh, especially like on the 5K and up frequencies. But I find that if you just use it at like 20 to 30% on a master out, it really kind of gives you that professional sheen, like that clarity in the high end. And then it kind of controls the dynamics in the low end also. I'm not sure exactly what it does, but it sounds great. So that's what I'm using. I switched from the OTT to Mixcentric, and honestly, I really love the results that I'm getting from that plugin. So if you ever see like a big sale on Waves website, I cannot recommend this plugin enough. I really, really like it. And it, like I said, it does not bring out so much of that harsh, like 2K stuff in my mix. So that's why I made the switch. So now my automatic master chain on my Ableton template has that right after my stereo to mono plugin from Good Hertz.
Cool. That's some nice diverse choices, I think we talked about today for our Desert Island Shootout. I hope people enjoyed this show. It's just was just about giving our opinion on those essential plugins. I think that you can use to pretty much like make everything and anything sound good. I didn't want to go too much into specific things for a specific instrument. Well, I did talk about the drum bus, but it's like a master out type that can be applied on pretty much anything. It's I've always said, just because it's called a drum bus doesn't mean you can't try it out on some vocals or some bass or something, just to see what you can do with it. So any last word, Mr. JT?
Well, I think that if you just try out one of these 6 plugins today, first of all, you will get instant results. And I think that on our part, it's going to be mission accomplished.
Yeah, perfect. All right, guys. So on this positive note, I'm going to wish you a great week. Keep making that awesome music and keep grinding, keep learning new things. And we'll see you guys next week.
And in the words of the very wise Eric Thomas, grind.
Grind. All right. Peace out, guys.
Peace out.
Thanks for listening to the podcast, guys. Remember to subscribe if you like what you hear. We're on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. Also, if you want to support us, head on to delicatebeats.com. You can find our serum packs, our contact instruments, and also plenty of freebies if you subscribe to the newsletter. Don't forget to follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and once again, keep making that awesome music.